Welcome everyone to LeaderJam Live in our LeaderJam webinar today with Tori Hallowell. She's an amazing LeaderJam coach. We're delighted to have you on board with us, whether you're a LeaderJam user or a coach. We're planning on at least 2 webinars a month now, which will feature our own coach experts and prominent thought leaders and authors on a really great diverse range of leadership topics. So if you have any ideas for us on webinar topics you'd like to hear about, please send us a note at info@leaderjam.com, or even better, fill out the email survey that will be sent to you after the webinar today. So we are very fortunate to have Tori Hallowell with us today. Tori's session is on listening, a foundational skill for leaders and coaches and anyone really. So before I introduce her, let's go over a few important but admittedly not exciting details on how to get the most out of your webinar experience today. Tori's going to present until roughly 12:45, and we want you to have the opportunity to comment or put questions to her on the subject matter today. So we reserve the last 15 minutes of the hour at least for Q&A. There's a chat window on the right side of your webinar screen, and please feel free to use the chat anytime, either during Tori's presentation as questions occur to you, or during the Q&A session. And I will see your chat questions and surface them during the Q&A after Tori presents. There are 2 more mundane notes here. One is to get the best audio and video experience, close any unnecessary applications on your computer during the webinar. And finally, we'll be sending you a feedback survey following the webinar. So please take half a minute, and that's literally all it takes, to fill out the survey, and that will help us bring the best webinar content and presenters to you. So now let me introduce Tori Hallowell. Tori is one of our Tier 1 coaches and an expert in strategies to help you manage your energy and time. She's got multiple coaching certifications in this area and tons of experience in educational arenas. Tori founded Hallowell Coaching in Allston, Mass., which is in the Boston area, and has helped many leaders to be more productive, avoid burnout, and show up with more positive energy. I met Tori last year through another LeaderJam coach reference, and interestingly, I was immediately bowled over with her deep listening skills. So when Tori suggested this webinar topic after coming on board at LeaderJam, it was a no-brainer, an automatic yes. Tori is really just a delight to work with. You don't feel like it's work as a coach and a colleague, and you can actually book a session with Tori on LeaderJam. Just log into the LeaderJam site, go to set up your session, select the first challenge area, culture or time management, and then select Tier 1 coaches. Tori will come up as one of the Tier 1 coaches on our platform, and you can book the session right there. And if you can't remember all of that, I understand completely. Just send a note to us at info@leaderjam.com, and we will connect you with Tori. Tori, welcome. So glad you were with us today.
Hey, Chip. So excited to be here with you and with everyone else today to talk about work. Yeah.
Great. And I'm excited about this topic because it's foundational for just about every context in life. So
yeah. Yep. Life, work, relationships, home, office, everything. Yep.
Great. Exactly. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you now, and your slide presentation just came up.
Oh, yep. We're going to start.
And we're gonna show the whole slide set. Actually, it came up at the end. Where are we here?
We're almost there. Here we are.
Here we are. Okay, got it. You're off and running. Thanks, Tori.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Chip. Thank you for that introduction. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be with you here today on this beautiful Thursday. At least it's beautiful in Boston. I have no idea where you're joining me from, but it's just so great to be here with you today. I just want to take a moment and thank you for signing up for this webinar, for taking the time out of your really busy life to join me here today. I know we all have long to-do lists, we have projects, we have situations and challenges that are always being thrown our way. So I just really want to acknowledge you for taking this hour out of your day to learn about a really important critical skill, and that is listening. A skill that I always say we were never taught to master, but we were always expected to know how to do and how to implement it. So thank you for joining me today, and for investing your time in this webinar. And for those of you who are on the East Coast, I'm making an assumption, but I'm assuming that you might be multitasking now with your lunch and this webinar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with my first assignment for you, or my first practice in listening. And that is that I'm going to encourage you right now, or challenge you, to put all of your distractions away. Just for this 1 hour. This hour is for you. You've carved it out. You've committed to this webinar. I thank you for that. So let's make the most of it. And let's really start this webinar on listening by tuning in and being fully present with what I'm going to teach you and share with you this afternoon. So what I challenge you to do is put away all your distractions. So if you didn't listen to Chip and you left all your tabs up and running, especially your email tab, I'm challenging you right now. Click out of that. Put it away. Put your phone away, put it on silent, slip it into a drawer or a coat pocket or your bag, because you have taken this time to really invest in listening and learning how to listen. And I want to make sure that you get the most out of this webinar, out of your time right now. So that's what I'm going to first challenge you with. We're jumping right in with some action in this webinar. So listening, okay, this webinar is entitled Listening, Learned Secrets. I love the word secrets, to deep impact and big influence. So as a leader, as a colleague, as a manager, boss, as a fellow coach, how can you really create deep impact, and how can you really influence others by something as simple as being a really good listener, right? That's really what the question and what the challenge is today. So my goal is to really teach you all about listening, right? This is a skill that we were never taught. No one ever broke it down for us or encouraged us to practice it. And so I really am going to break that down for you today. I'm going to teach you how to be a better listener. And my goal is that by you learning how to be a deeper listener and having more impact with your coworkers and your employees, your clients, with your friends and family, is that you're going to, in the future, avoid miscommunication, right? You're going to avoid making mistakes that are going to cost you unnecessary time, money, energy, all of that. Because listening, it really is all about that deep impact, so that deep connection, and it's all about clarity, right? Not making mistakes, not making miscommunication. And so I really want you to tune in, and I want to ask you this question. When was the last time, on the flip side, when you felt frustrated that no one was listening to you, that you felt unheard and therefore felt disrespected or unappreciated, right? This happens to us all the time. We feel frustrated when we don't feel like we're being seen, heard, understood, or listened to. And so with today's webinar, at the end of this hour, you're going to be able to take this knowledge, this new skill set of yours, and start implementing it into your life so that you are never going to be the person who makes someone else feel that frustrated, right? That feeling that you have felt. So this webinar is all about ways that you can change how you communicate and how you interact with your colleagues, with your clients, with your employees, especially if you are in a leadership position. You're going to learn how to deeply connect with others to avoid that miscommunication. You're going to learn how to listen between the words. And this is both at work and at home. And I'm going to explain what I mean by listen between the words. So that's kind of a hook to draw you in. And that will be revealed to you in a few slides. But what's so great about today's webinar is I love win-win situations. And this is a total win-win because you're going to be able to apply today's information at work. It's going to make such a difference, but it's also going to help at home. It's going to help with your friends, with your family, if you have kids, communicating with your kids, with your significant other. How many times have we been told by our significant other, like, you're just not listening, right? So this is really a win-win for you today. And it's really about learning how to implement a skill we were never taught. And here's the thing. I truly believe that listening, when we're really deeply connected, when we're really tuned in, when we are expert listeners, this is a superpower. This is a magical skill. And truth be told, it was a skill that I didn't really know about. I was not a great listener until I became a coach, until I became a certified coach and had to actually practice listening. And so when I work with clients, and when, this is something that all LeaderJam coaches are experts in. We're all expert listeners. We all have our different niches. We all have our different areas of expertise. But the one thing that we share across the board is we are expert listeners. So when we tune in with our clients, we are tuned in with them. We are hearing every word, every emotion, every fear, every challenge. And that's what I really want you to walk away with today, is the skill to be able to also utilize this as your own superpower. Right? How magical is that? Okay, so here we go. We're going to dive in. And there we go. Okay, so with this slide, I want to ask you, how many times have you heard or thought or said one of these questions, right? How many times did this come up for you in your life? So questions such as, do they hear me? Are you even listening? What did they just say? Just sit down, be quiet, and listen up, right? I don't know about you guys, but the last one, just sit down, be quiet, and listen up. Whenever I hear that, as I was creating this slide, I got flashbacks to when we were little, right? When we were children. How many times when we were younger and in the classroom with a teacher who was at their wits' end would just say to the class, or to those two kids who were being disruptive or wouldn't stop talking, hey, kids, just sit down, be quiet, and listen up, right? We've all been there. But the thing is that how are we supposed to listen, right? How are we supposed to listen up? And with some of these other questions, I think we've all either said these or thought these, are they even listening to me? Did they just hear me? Did they just hear what I said? Are they paying attention? Right? Or we've thought, we've been in a conversation and we've been on the opposite side. Like, what did they just say? Right? Because I'm not listening right now. I'm tuned out. What did they just say? Can you remind me? Right? So we've all been guilty. We've all been the victim of this. We've all been guilty of being the person who's not really paying attention or tuned in, especially when we were growing up. Okay, so I have filled this PowerPoint with lots of hopefully funny comics for you. I really enjoy humor and having fun and being playful with new skills. I think that's an important part of implementing new things that we're learning to make it fun and not make it too stressful. And so here is a great example of when effective listening fails, right? So here are 3 doctors or nurses, and they have dropped the person because they didn't all count and lift on 3 because one of them wasn't paying attention. So when effective listening fails, when we're not tuned in, when we're distracted, when we're not paying attention, mistakes happen. And sometimes they are catastrophic mistakes, such as dropping someone off of the operating table. But I actually want to take a moment here and actually share a story with you all about how listening failed me and my friends a couple years ago, and how I just think this is a great example. So bear with me. A couple years ago, I was planning a girls' weekend with 2 of my good girlfriends. Haley was at the time living in Memphis, Tennessee, and she was wrapping up her 2-year residency stint there. And my friend Carrie Ann and I, before Haley left Memphis, we really wanted to go and have a girls' weekend, visit and see her because she'd been, pretty consumed with work and with residency. And of course, we wanted to explore Memphis. Neither one of us had been to Tennessee, and this was the perfect excuse to go do some traveling. And so we were able to, and I'm proud of us for this, we were able to find a time where we were all free to hop on a Skype call and really plan out and organize, okay, when was this girl weekend going to be? So we hopped on a Skype call, we pulled out our calendars, we were able to find a date, again, another miracle, where we were all free, right? So we picked the date, we know we're going to Memphis, we're going to see Haley, we're going to have a girls' weekend. Now, at the time, Carrie Ann was going through a lot in her life. She had a lot of things kind of pulling at her from all directions. She had some family stuff going on. She had just started a new job. So during the Skype call, when we were picking the dates and making these plans, she was distracted, right? We could see it. We could hear it. She was being distracted by her phone, by other things she had to do, and she wasn't fully tuned in to the plan. And how do I know this, right? You're probably thinking, oh, she booked the wrong dates or something happened, So flash forward, we all get off the Skype call. We all go make our travel plans. Flash forward a couple weeks. We are getting ready for the Memphis trip, and Haley reaches out to Carrie Ann and I to ask for our travel information because she wants to start to organize transportation from the airport to her apartment. So she reaches out to Carrie Ann and I, hey, can you send me your travel transportation arrangements, your flight information? So, of course, we get online, we send her all of our information. And it's then that Haley realizes that Carrie Ann has booked her flight on the correct days, luckily, but to Nashville. So Carrie Ann is going to be going to Nashville, and I'm going to be going to Memphis to visit Haley. And it's in that moment, right, where effective listening totally failed Carrie Ann, right? She was distracted. She was trying to do too many things at once. She was multitasking while we were on that Skype call. So she was kind of, clearly she thought we were going to Nashville, not Memphis. So then when she booked the plane flights, she booked them to the wrong city. And turns out Nashville and Memphis, they're not close by one another. They're 3 to 4 hours apart. So the moral of the story, the way that it ends, just so no one is left hanging, is that Carrie Ann, of course, called the airlines, was able for a small fee to change her tickets so that she was flying to the correct city. And the girls' weekend was saved. We had a wonderful time. But it did cost her something, right? It cost her a little bit of money to make that change to her flight. It definitely cost her time to get on the air, to call the airline and to make those changes. And it cost her frustration, right? She was frustrated. She was embarrassed. And so all of these consequences came out of her not effectively listening and paying attention to what she was doing. And so that's just an example for you on, when we're not tuned in, when we're not fully present, when we're trying to do too many things at once, when we're not listening, sometimes there are some severe consequences, and it can really result in us wasting our time, feeling frustrated, maybe losing some money. And nobody wants that. Okay, so listening, going back to listening, right? Listening is a skill we were never taught, but we were expected to master. So I want to quickly go over what a skill is, right? A skill is something that we're taught, that we have to practice over time to get better at it, to master it. We have to be persistent when learning a new skill, not to give up, especially when we face challenges or obstacles or we're not good at it right away, or we make mistakes. And a skill is something that we have to be patient about, right? It doesn't come right away. It doesn't come overnight. So as we become older and we're adults and we take on all these leadership roles, we are always learning new skills and implementing them and getting better at our job and our area of expertise. But our skill level and our skill mastery level does tend to diminish over time, right? The time in our life when we are learning skills all the time, nonstop, is when we're younger, right? Think of all the basic skills that we had to learn and be taught when we were younger, right? Everything from learning how to tie your shoes, learning how to tell time, learning how to play the piano or play soccer, right? Those are all skills that we didn't know. Now we don't even think twice about. Learning how to drive, right? You don't even think twice about driving, right? But think back to when you were 16 and learning how to drive, how nerve-wracking it was, and how you had to think about every single move. Where's the gas pedal? Where's the brake? How do I put on my indicator, right? All of those skills, they took time. They took practice. They took persistence. Fun story for you real quick that just popped into my head. The first time I ever got into a car to learn how to drive, I was driving through the streets of my old high school, which was kind of tucked off the main road, and a police car pulled me over. And just that totally freaked me out, right? So right there, it pulled me over because I was driving too slowly and I looked a little suspicious. So they just pulled me over, realized I was learning to drive. They went on their way. But right there, I had to keep going. I couldn't just let that one obstacle of the police stopping me my first time in a car driving stop me, right? So it's patience, persistence, practice. And the thing is that listening, we were never actually taught how to listen, how to tune in, how to be present with the person in front of us, how to effectively communicate so that we knew exactly what was going on and so that we could really build that trust and relationship with the person in front of us. Okay, so the definition of listening, right? I actually went to the dictionary and I looked this up because I really, I was curious about how listening was defined. And the two definitions came up that really struck me. The first is listening is paying attention to a sound, right? So when we hear sounds, music, the vacuum cleaner, right? We're listening, we're paying attention to a sound that's being made. And the second part is listening is to hear something with thoughtful attention. Give consideration. And what really stood out to me and that I want you to really, hone into is the thoughtful attention part, right? Being thoughtful. So this really means, not being distracted, not half listening, not multitasking, but being really thoughtful and aware of giving your attention to someone else and giving them that consideration, right? So that's really what listening is being aware of someone making a sound that is basically them making words, and then giving that person your thoughtful attention and your thoughtful consideration in that moment. So, and it's a difference, right? Here is Dr. Evil from good old Austin Powers with his quotations, his famous quotations. And this is funny because I know you hear me, like I know you hear the sounds I'm making, the words that that are coming out of my mouth, but are you listening? Are you listening to what I'm actually saying? I know that you can hear that I'm making noise, but are you listening, right? Okay, so today with this webinar, here are the 3 main takeaways that I really hope that I implement for you today. Okay, so the first one is there are 3 types of listening, and we're going to go over each type, obviously, and I'm going to give you some examples so that you can really start to implement these different types of listening and really play around with them after today's webinar. So we're going to go over those 3 types, and you're probably going to notice where you might be falling short, right? It's gonna kind of pop up for you, like, oh my, like I never listened that way. It's never occurred to me to listen that way. No one ever taught me how to do that. I've always thought we were supposed to do it this way, right? So you're gonna realize pretty quickly what type of listening you tend to utilize most often. And that's great because that's going to give you a foundation, a starting off place. And then after today's webinar, you're going to have the tools to be able to implement the other types of listening moving forward, which is going to, is going to have huge impact for your relationships at work and for just communication across the board. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we're going to identify ways to deeply connect and really hear what it is your employees, your coworkers, your clients, your significant other, what they're really saying, right? So how do we deeply connect? And the third thing is we're going to talk about ways to increase communication effectiveness at work and at home to advance relationships and then also to boost productivity, right? So that is huge in business. How can we be more efficient? How can we save time? How can we make more money? How can we boost productivity? So much of that comes down to how can we more effectively communicate, which comes down to how can we utilize our superpower and truly deeply listen. Okay, so that's what we're going to cover today. All right, so here are 3 types of listening. We have subjective listening, objective listening, and intuitive listening. All right, so hopefully those have caught your attention. Okay, so diving in, first we have subjective listening. Okay, so subjective listening. This is when you are listening to someone with your own agenda in mind, right? Which means that you are only half listening. You're half listening because you're listening to the person in front of you, and at the same time, you're coming up with your response, right? You're coming up with your advice. You're coming up with your own personal example or story that's going to relate to whatever it is they are talking about. So you're half listening. And because you're only half listening, this is a very basic surface level connection, right? Because you're not fully listening or present or tuned in with the person in front of you. Now, this is the type of listening that we were all taught. So we were taught how to subjectively listen. And we actually think, a lot of us, think that we're good listeners because we're able to relate to someone or come up with an example or give advice right away, right? We're able to hopefully problem solve for the person in front of us. But we're actually not doing a great job at listening. We're subjectively listening because we're coming up with our own thoughts in mind first. And oftentimes, because we're listening with our own agenda, we interrupt, right? Because we believe that whatever we're going to share, whatever advice we're going to give, whatever story we're going to dive into to help the other person recognize, like, hey, I've been there too. I know what you're going through. I know how I can help. I've had a similar experience, right? We interrupt them to share our own thoughts. Has this ever happened to you where you're trying to go ask for help or share a story, share experience, or you're venting about something and the person you're trying to talk to or get help from interrupts you to share their own story, their own personal experience, right? How frustrating is that, right? In the moment, we feel unheard, we feel disrespected. Like, what is the point? We're wasting our time, right? So I have a story for you. This or a hypothetical. We'll call it a hypothetical. I have a hypothetical situation that I actually have pulled from my past in the years before I became a coach, working to help leaders with listening. So here's an example to kind of really illustrate for you and demonstrate for you subjective listening. So imagine a coworker walks into their colleague's office, okay? And the coworker comes to this colleague to vent about a client they're struggling with. Now, this client is not respecting the boundaries. They're very difficult to deal with. They're demanding. They are sending crazy emails and requests late at night and early in the morning, kind of nonstop. When they don't get what they want, they believe maybe there should be exceptions to whatever it is that they are buying or looking for, right? When the client doesn't get what they want, they're threatened to go to the manager of the coworker with these issues. And the coworker's been dealing with this client for a long time, and they're sick of it, right? They're tired. They're tired of dealing with them. They're frustrated, and they just, it's out of their hands, though, right? They know that it's a client. They can't just wash their hands of them. They can't just shoo them away because it's important for the company. It's important for the overall mission. So, anyways, this is the backstory, right? So the coworker goes in to vent to their colleague, right? To vent about this client they're really frustrated about and they're just sick of dealing with. Now, this coworker is subjectively listening. This colleague is subjectively listening to this coworker, right? And they're only half listening. So partway through the coworker venting about the client, their colleague starts to give them advice on what they would do, right? Oh, I would do this, or I don't let it get to you. Do this instead. Or, oh my gosh, I've had clients like that in the past. Let me tell you about this horrible client I once had. Right? And they launch into their own story. So what ends up happening in this moment is that this colleague is forming how they're going to respond in advance versus actually listening to their coworker who just needs to vent, who's frustrated, right? This colleague might be interrupting the coworker. And what ends up happening is the coworker feels unheard, right? They're not looking for help in that moment. They're not looking for advice. They're just looking to be seen, to be heard, to be validated in the moment. So this happens often in our lives, with friends, with coworkers, in meetings and staff meetings, with employees, where someone comes to us, they're frustrated, they want to talk about something, and we jump the gun, right? We jump into the conversation partway through without letting that person finish whatever it is they have to get off their chest or talk about. And sometimes we get caught up in this one-up each other game, right? Where we try to one-up each other with examples or with stories or with similar situations that have happened to us. Now, sometimes we don't mean to one-up each other. We just do it naturally. And sometimes we believe that by sharing a similar experience, we're going to show the person who's talking to us, hey, we understand, or here's a way that I dealt with this too, so that I feel like I'm building a deeper connection with you. I'm showing you that I understand because I've had a similar experience. Right? We've all done this. We've all been guilty of doing this. We've all been on the receiving end of doing this or having this done to us, right? But the thing is that in that moment, the coworker doesn't care about the colleague and the colleague's issues with other clients or the advice that they have. They just want to vent, right? So this is really where so many of us fall short, right? We were taught how to subjectively listen when we're half listening. We are distracted. We're multitasking while we're pretending to listen to the person in front of us, blah, 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 talk on. In our minds, we're coming up with our to-do list. We're thinking about what we're going to have for dinner. We're thinking about what we have to buy at the grocery store, right? We're not fully tuned in or listening. Or we are so quick to respond, we're coming up with our response in advance, usually a story or a similar situation that we've experienced, and we're not tuned in, we're not listening. And so the person we're talking to feels unheard, they feel disrespected. And when it's subjective listening, this is really when mistakes are made, right? The consequences happen here, the miscommunication happens here. So back to my Memphis story, when we were booking those tickets and picking those dates, Carrie Ann was subjectively listening at that moment. She was half listening, right? That's why she booked tickets to Nashville, not Memphis, because she wasn't fully tuned in. She wasn't fully present. For her, she had other things on her mind that were pulling her away, other distractions and to-do lists, and that running inner narrative pulled her away, right? And there was consequences because of that. So to really be aware of when you're subjectively listening to people moving forward, because it's going to hit you, right? As a coach now, I do not subjectively listen when I'm working with my clients, right? I am so tuned in with them, but I'm going to admit right now that I do struggle with subjective listening when I'm with my friends, right? When I'm hanging out with my girlfriends or I'm talking to my parents, right? And they're sharing something or they're venting about something. Sometimes I will fall back to subjective listening, but I get that gut check. I can feel it, like that cringe, like, oh no, I'm subjective listening right now. Like quickly backpedal, right? So just be aware moving forward of when you're subjectively listening and what the outcome is. What are the consequences? What are the mistakes? What is the lack of clarity that is experienced when you're subjectively listening? And on the flip side, when someone is subjectively listening to you, how does that feel? How unheard or disrespected or frustrated do you feel in that moment? Okay. So, I love this. So here's a quote for you. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply, right? So that sums it up right there. And here's just a funny cartoon for you. Two women are at dinner, and one is thanking her friend. Thank you so much for letting me go on. You're such a great listener. Not realizing that her friend across the table is half listening, subjectively listening, because they're also thinking of their grocery list. Right? I need to buy this. I need to buy bread, milk, cereal, broccoli, eggs, blah, 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 right? So those are two great examples, summaries of how we are subjectively listening to one another all the time. Okay, so what is the second type of listening? Great question. I knew you were wondering. The second type is objective listening. So this is when we leave our advice, our stories, and similar experiences behind. Instead, what we do is we acknowledge and validate what the person is sharing. So that person feels heard, they feel understood, they feel seen, and they feel important, right? They feel respected. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're boosting that respect because you're listening completely from your head. You're totally tuned in. So in the same scenario, when the coworker is going to vent to their colleague about this really frustrating client, demanding client they have, instead of the colleague interrupting them, jumping the gun and responding with advice or with help or with their, sharing their own similar horror stories of clients they've dealt with in the past, instead, that colleague is objectively listening and they're acknowledging and validating what their coworker is saying. Saying something like, oh my gosh, like it's totally understandable that you're frustrated, how draining that is, how time consuming that is. It makes sense that you're sick of this client. If I can do anything to help, just let me know, right? So really acknowledging and validating what the coworker shared. And the way to acknowledge and validate is basically to take whatever is being shared, right, by the other person, and summarizing it and saying it back to them so that they recognize, oh my gosh, that person really listened to me because they just basically said back to me what I said to them, which means that you are fully tuned in and in the moment with them, right? Because you are being able to acknowledge what the issue is and validate what they're going through, right? And doesn't your opinion, your judgments, left at the door, checked at the door, right? They don't pop up. Your stories, your similar experiences, your advice, left at the door, right? Not a part of the conversation. And then the person in front of you really, really feels heard, right? So if you're in a leadership position, this is how to deeply start to build that connection, that trust with your employees, with your clients. And this is when there is no miscommunication here, right? Because you're completely tuned in. So here you go. Just to set aside your judgment, right? Put that judge aside. No judgment needed here. Okay, the third type of listening is intuitive listening, okay? So this is the listening that we do when we're listening between the lines and between the words, right? So we're listening for tone, attitude, fears, emotions, inner thoughts. We're listening for what is not being fully expressed or said. So think back to high school English class when your English teacher was teaching you how to read between the words, we read between the lines. They were teaching you how to look for symbolism, foreshadowing, the metaphors, the symbols, what is the true essence, right? We were taught that in English class. We were taught that when it comes to reading, but we were never taught that when it comes to listening to one another, which is how we primarily communicate, is by talking and listening, right? So when you're intuitively listening, you're listening for what is not being said explicitly. And this is allowing you to connect with the person who's talking with both your head and your heart. So it's not just coming from your head, which is objective listening. This is both the head and the heart. And this is, really when we tap into that magical skill, that superpower of listening, right? And when I say you're listening with your heart, I mean you're listening with your gut, your intuition. You're listening with your complete, total body, right? So when you think back to that example, right, with the coworker and the colleague and their horrendous client, with intuitive listening, when the coworker comes to talk and vent and talk out this issue they're having with their colleague, the colleague listens. They don't interrupt. They leave their judgment and their advice at the door. And what they're really listening for is what's really going on with this coworker, right? They're listening for their tone, their body language, what's really being expressed. It could be, is this coworker, are they afraid of failing? Are they afraid of losing this client? Are they struggling because they don't know how to handle this conflict? Are they truly afraid the client might go to the manager and they don't know how to ask for help? What is really the tone and the attitude? Do they just need to be angry and vent it out and get it out of them so they can let it go and move on? Are they looking for some comic relief, something to make them laugh and smile because they're so down about this? What is it that this coworker really needs in the moment? And when you fully tune in and listen to what they're sharing, you get the story. But when you are intuitively listening, you also get that gut check of what it is that's really being shared and what's really needed. And it creates that space so that you can then ask for permission, like, hey, sounds like you're really struggling with this. Like, can I give you some advice? Would you like help with that? And then they can say yes or no. It gives them the opportunity to create their own boundaries, to say yes or no. Like, no, I'm good. I know what I need to do. I just need to vent it out. Or, yeah, I'm really struggling with this. I'm really fearful of the outcome of this. I need your help, right? So it really does deepen those connections, that relationship, and really helps to boost that communication. Okay, I'm going to take a sip of water because I'm about to lose my voice, so bear with me. Okay. So there we have it. We have the 3 types of listening, right? Subjective, objective, and intuitive. Primarily, we tend to all kind of listen subjectively because that's what we've been taught. That's what culture and society has taught us. That's how we are expected, or what we think we're expected to listen that way. But now you know these 2 other types of listening that really help you dial in, stay present, stay focused, and really hear what's being said, even between the lines, right? So you might be wondering, okay, how do I start playing around with these 3 types of listening, right? And it's simplistic in steps. It can be hard to remember to implement it, right? So how do I start deeply connecting with those around me? The first thing is when someone comes into you because they have a problem or they need help or they just need to talk something out, or you're in a board meeting, right? The first thing you want to do is you want to pause. All right, you want to pause because you want to be able to take that pause, and it's a brief moment so that you can then fully direct all of your attention to that person who's speaking, right? So when you pause, you're letting all those other distractions, your to-do list, whatever project you were on, your phone, your computer, your email, you're letting that go. So that's in the pause. Then you're taking a quick breath, and that does not mean like a big, don't breathe like that. You're going to freak them out, right? Just take a quick breath, a small breath to center yourself, right? To get into the moment. And then start reflecting on what is being shared, right? And this is the active listening part. Reflect on what is being shared, what the story is, what the problem is, what they're asking for help with. Really start to reflect on what's going on between the words, between the lines. That's the intuitive part. And then when they stop talking, that is your opportunity and your response to respond, right? Whether it's acknowledging and validating, whether it's asking for what they need, if they want advice or help. If they're asking you a question, it opens it up for now you have the space to respond the way that you need to respond, to clarify whatever it is going on in their world or in their life, right? So these are the steps to start implementing the 3 types of listening. Pause, breathe, reflect, respond. Okay. So, just like karate, right? That black belt that everyone wanted back in the day. Listening is a skill that takes practice, right? It takes practice. And much like learning a martial arts sport like karate, it takes discipline, right? It's not going to come overnight, and it's not going to just, wave you that magic wand, all of a sudden you're an expert listener. It's something that you are going to have to practice, and you're going to have to be persistent about, and you're going to have to be patient about. And I'm going to be completely honest, you are going to mess up, right? And that is okay. I admit it. I often still mess up, even as a coach who's trained to be an expert listener, who prides herself on being a master superpower listener. I still mess up. And it's when I'm with my friends, and I fall back into my subjective listening, old habits and old patterns, right? So here's the thing. You're going to make mistakes, and that's okay, right? In those moments if you are actively trying to be a better listener, if you take a week and you're like, this week, I'm going to focus on being the best listener that I can be. And I'm going to really play around with objective listening, intuitive listening, and see the connections that I make, see how much time I save, see how much more effective and productive my team is, right? If you focus on that, you're going to see these changes. You're going to feel them. You're going to experience them. So when you make that mistake, don't go beating yourself up, right? This is not a place for beating ourselves up. Practice self-compassion in that moment. And keep trying, because from every mistake that we make, we learn something from it. We're going to learn what it feels like when we subjectively listen. We're going to learn what it is when someone's frustrated because we're not tuned in, we're not paying attention, right? So this skill of listening, it's all about being totally present in the moment with who you're talking with. It's about leaving those distractions behind, zoning into the conversation. It's all about practicing mindful listening, right? Being really in the moment. And just like karate, just like that black belt, doesn't happen overnight. It just takes some time. Okay. So here are some tips, right? Here are some tips for how to start actively listening and playing around with these different levels and types of listening. And I really want to encourage you to when you think about listening, to set aside a chunk of time where you're really going to make this your top priority, right? This is a skill. You got to make it a priority. You got to be disciplined about that. So whether it's, I'm going to do it next week, Monday through Friday, I'm going to do it this weekend when I'm home because it will feel a little bit more comfortable, practicing this with my friends and my significant other, or my family, or my roommates, whatever it is, carve out a chunk of time where you're going to make this a priority of yours, right? And then start implementing the 4 steps, which were to pause, to breathe, to respond, and to reflect, and implement these helpful tools. So when someone comes to you, or you're in a meeting, or you're communicating with others, and someone comes to you because they want to talk, right? And you're like, okay, they're coming to have this conversation. I'm putting on my imaginary superpower listening hat, right? Because here they come. The first tip I have for you is put down the phone, right? Oh my goodness. Our phones, magical tools, major distractors, right? So when someone comes to talk to you and your phone is in your hand, or you're in a meeting and the phone is in front of you on the table, what you're subconsciously implying to them is, I'm listening, but I'm only half listening, because if my phone buzzes or lights up or goes off, I'm going to be distracted by it. I'm going to turn to it. I'm going to check it. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to pick it up, right? So you're kind of already implying that, hey, I'm already only half listening because my phone gets the rest of my attention, right? So if you are wanting to really objectively, intuitively listen to someone, right, be fully mindful, present in the moment, tuned into them, you got to put your phone away. And by that, I mean not just on silent. I mean off the table, in a bag, in a coat pocket, in your drawer, wherever. It's got to go away, right? And that's going to signal to the person in front of you, hey, nothing's distracting me in this moment. I am totally present here with you. I am respecting whatever it is you're going to share with me. Like, let's get to work, right? So put the phone away. Now, here's the thing, right? In real life scenarios, right? We don't always have time for these conversations, right? We don't always have time to show up and listen the way that we want to listen objectively and intuitively, right? Maybe we are waiting for that call to come in. Maybe we're frantically refreshing our email because we're just waiting for that confirmation email to be shot through to us, right? we have all these other things that are on top of our mind, right? So if someone comes in to talk to you and you just don't have the time, then let them know that, right? Be honest. Say, hey, I so want to hear what's going on in your world right now. I so want to help you problem solve this issue. I just don't have the time right now. Do you mind if we touch base at 2:00 this afternoon, right? Find a time where you can have that real conversation, where you can then put the phone, the computer, the other problems aside for that moment. So that's the second tip. The third tip is play around with these 3 levels, right? These 3 types of listening. And I use play and I want that to be the key word because it's supposed to be playful, right? It's supposed to be fun. And you're going to be able to see how much you get back from really tuning in and really listening to people, right? You're going to be able to see the benefits and feel the benefits right away. So I really want to encourage you to be playful about this, be curious, experiment, and really be open to see what the changes bring for your office and for your home life. And the last thing is, don't be afraid to ask for feedback. Especially if it's someone that you're really close with and trust already, you can let them know, hey, I realized I am kind of a basic listener. This is something that I'm actively working on in my office life. I didn't know if I could, play around with listening with you and ask for some feedback, So don't be afraid to ask for feedback from people, especially from if you have employees or maybe not clients, but employees or people in your life, friends, family, maybe even your boss. Don't be afraid to ask for feedback, because when we get that feedback, that gives us the opportunity to grow, right, and to make changes moving forward. And also to know how far we've come, right? If you were kind of a distracted half listener before, and then you actively work on being a great listener moving forward, you put the phone down, you're objectively showing up, you're checking your agenda at the door, and you're no longer interrupting, and you're fully tuned in, you're acknowledging and validating what people say. If you practice for a week or two and then you ask for some feedback, people are gonna be like, oh, I've noticed such a change in you. I really respect the way that you listened to what I said, right? I really appreciate that you saw what was going on and you stepped, you gave me that advice that helped, or that you acknowledged how I felt, right? So don't be afraid to ask for that feedback. Okay, so to kind of start to wrap this all up, what are the benefits? What is the point? Why take the time to practice this new skill? The first is that by becoming an active listener, right, by intuitively and objectively listening to those around us, what ends up happening is we end up building deeper connections, deeper relationships. We really have that platform of trust and respect. And that's what it does. It bolsters that mutual respect, because you're totally tuned in and present with the other person. You're acknowledging and validating what's going on, what they need help with, what they're frustrated by, and then you're there to listen and to help, right? Truly listening, it also increases communication. And by that, I mean, not only does it increase communication, clarity of the issues, but it decreases or it prevents miscommunication and mistakes and projects going wrong, or things being dropped or forgotten or falling between the cracks, or the wrong plane tickets being booked, right? Which ultimately is going to save you time. It's going to save you hassle and frustration. It's going to save you money. It's going to really just save you energy. So there's lots of perks and benefits to really listening to one another, to really tuning in. And the other benefit is that you get to hear what's being said between the lines. So you're going to have, this is the secret power in action, right? You're going to really be able to hear what people are struggling with. They're not willing to admit or share, maybe something they're scared about, or they're nervous about, or they need help with. And you're really going to be able to step up and be that mentor and that leader that they're really looking to, that they really need guidance from. Now, just to remember that, again, this is a skill that you can master. You can be a master listener. You can have this as a superpower tucked in your back pocket that you pull out whenever someone wants to come and talk to you. But again, it takes practice and it takes patience. And so my last little wrap-up slide for you is this reminder, right? Everybody loves a good listener. No one ever says, ugh, I don't like him, I don't respect him, he's such a good listener, right? No one says that, right? So just look at this little comic example. This guy says, Buck, you get along with everyone. What's your secret? And Buck said, nobody hates a listener, right? Everyone loves a listener. This can be your superpower. This can be one of the things that you are known for, that you are the go-to person because you're quickly able to figure out the issue because you're listening, clarify what's going on, problem solve, move into action, right? Everyone wants a leader like that. Everyone wants to be that person, right? So this is just your reminder that listening, which is such an underutilized skill, can be a total superpower skill for you moving forward. And I really want to encourage you to implement it, to pass it forward, to teach others how to listen, to really guide them in how they can step up as a really expert listener. How do you want to be remembered and described by your coworkers? Do you want to be described and remembered as the leader who never listened, who was always on their phone, distracted, who always gave unwanted advice? No, you want to be remembered as the person who was fully present, tuned in, acknowledged and validated, gave great advice, was helpful, was a mentor, and was really there to support and encourage and respect their employees, right? That's what we all live for. That's who we all want to represent and be. So that is the webinar on listening, learn secrets to deep impact and big influence. And I'm hoping that you feel excited to implement these different types of listening in your life and to go out and explore them today. I kind of want to ask, who are you going to try these skills out with first? How can I help hold you accountable to playing around with these 3 levels of listening moving forward? What is the first step that you're going to take in your own life to start implementing this new superpower of yours? So I'm going to leave you with that. And this is the time for questions. So I would love to check in. I know Chip's there
Tori,
behind the scenes. So
yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Super useful. As you were unpacking this, Tori, I was thinking a lot of this, it's funny that we're never taught this stuff because it's so fundamental. And some of it is also kind of common sense.
Yeah. Yeah, true.
So we got some good questions. The first question is, it sounds like objective and intuitive listening can go together. Is there a place for subjective listening or not?
Not really. No, I think I'm going to be honest, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Based on what you said, it's kind of the default mode, right? Subjective listening is the default mode without attention and knowledge.
Yes, exactly. It's kind of the default mode. It's the level at which we've all been taught how to listen, which is, not really being taught. But we all want to aim for being primarily objective and intuitive listeners,
Right.
and leave subjective at the door.
Right. Good. Yeah, I agree with that. So if let's say you're a team leader at an organization, someone's asked, how do you pass this along as a team leader to your either employees or your coworkers?
Yeah.
Because you're not going to sit down and give them the great listening webinar that you just gave, right?
I think a lot of this is leading by example.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. So really taking the time as the leader to recognize your own shortcomings when it comes to listening, right? This is, again, something that we all struggle with. Before I became a coach, I struggled with it. So I know what it's like. So I think it really first is about you owning that you're going to make this a priority of yours, to implement the skill. And then really, if you are the leader, right, you are showing, teaching, mentoring, and educating those below you, right, as the leader. And so really just being able to own this, and walk your talk with being an expert listener. Right. And then being able to show those below you or that you interact with, how to really change the way that they're listening and showing up.
Right. And so I love the example of Nashville and Memphis. That was fantastic. Have you had any, faux pas listening moments in your life where you were supposed to be listening, but you weren't?
Yeah, it's funny you asked me that question. I think you can tell from my nervous laughter now that yes, I have. I just, as soon as you asked that question, I had like a flashback. So I have this flashback to this embarrassing moment, right? When we mess up or make mistakes, we're all often embarrassed by it, and that's why it kind of sticks with us. So I remember a couple years ago being in a staff meeting in my old 9-to-5 corporate job. I was in a staff meeting with my boss and all of my, coworkers on our team, and I was given a list of things that I had to get done or accomplish or work on. So I was given my, to-do list for the next week. And staff meeting ended, went about my work, got back to my desk, realized I hadn't really been listening, and I had no real idea what I was supposed to be doing. So then I basically had to like hang my head, do the shuffle walk of shame to my boss's office, knock, and be like, I need you to remind me what it is I need to be working on. Right? And basically it was something that I wasn't paying attention, and I need you to tell me again. And now I am paying attention.
You could either use that excuse or I was asleep, but neither one really work very well, do they?
Right? No. And she knew. She knew right away that I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah. I once stood in front of my wife playing my guitar, and she talked to me and did not hear a thing she said for 5 minutes. And then she called me back because she kind of knew I wasn't listening. And I was staring at her while she was talking to me. She called me back like 10 minutes later and said, "Did you pull the roast out of the oven?" And I said, "Oh, is that what you said to me?" So it happens to everyone, right? Yeah. And I thought your point was interesting too, that you can apply it with anyone. It's funny that we apply it, intentionally when we're coaching, but you can apply it in any situation with friends or with work colleagues. What do you think the relationship is between, if you were going to boil down the relationship between listening and great leadership, how would you boil that down?
I think the relationship connection really is when you are a really effective leader, right? When you really get to be a master listener, you are really effective in your delivery of your projects, whatever the work objective is, right? Because everyone is super clear on what's going on, what their tasks and roles are, and how to implement it and how to, put it into action, right? So there's that clarity piece, the effectiveness piece, the productivity piece. But also, your employees aren't going to get the job done if they don't feel respected by you, if they don't have respect for you. So, or they don't trust you, right? To be a leader, to show up and get the job done. So when you are fully able to tune in and listen to your employees, to hear them and they're also like learning from you, right? And so they're tuned in and they're listening. It really builds this really strong foundation of respect, trust, deep relationship. And that's kind of like that's the building blocks, right? That's the foundation for really having a well-oiled machine and company and team for them to really be effective.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love the idea, those two simple things, clarity in terms of your whole environment, if you're a good listener, and relationships, which leaders really need to function well. So I just love that. So Tori, thank you so much. It's been delightful to have you with us, and I learned a lot. And I'm a coach who practices listening, so that's it's a super important subject. I just wanted to let everyone know that over the next coming weeks, months, we have upcoming LeaderJam live webinars, and you can see a few of them on your screen here. We have an author interview coming up next week with Stephanie Warner, who's a fantastic MIT researcher, and she talks about technology and digitization, the digital world and change. That's going to be fantastic. Jennifer Dean is talking that same week, next week on April 11th, about your leadership identity, which is huge for a lot of us, and also a topic that's not touched on enough, and how to streamline and build your own authentic leadership identity. And then Demetrius Russell is one of our experts on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and he's going to explain to you and reveal why diversity can really advance communication and productivity for leaders in your organizations beyond just, filling the diversity or inclusion square. So all of those are coming up. Let us know if you have any questions. There's a small rating system at the end of the webinar that will come up. So please take a minute. I think it's actually less than that. It's about 5 seconds to fill that, to check the stars there. And Tori, thank you again.
Yes, thank you, Chip. Thank you for everyone for joining me today, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Great. And we'll see everyone at the next LeaderJam webinar. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.